The past paints itself in the present in peculiar yet prominent ways. These unfavorable reminders intrude when I least expect them, stark as squares of preserved paint on a dingy wall where frames once hung. From a societal perspective, a family unit is laden with idealistic expectations. These ideals can be as breakable as a window. Once the actualities shatter the pane, glass shards join the gravel. Wary, I wonder whether we really are our mother's glass. If I am meant to mirror my mother, why is it that I resemble her less and less? My mother started off as a great guide of right and wrong, only to shift into one of the shady strangers she surrounded herself with. The downfall of her appearance was accompanied by the degrading of her personality, a familiar face rendered unrecognizable. The behaviors began with passive aggression and progressed into theft and violence. The very woman who once cared for me began controlling me through guilt tripping and victim playing. She failed to contribute, and our roles of responsibility reversed. At 17 years old, I was emotionally and financially tried as a result of her negligence. Strangers started to flame up like shadows, their charcoal shapes flickering in and out of sight. One stranger was her ex, a scrawny, suspicious man who I later learned was involved with drug activity. The other was a man who drove a blue van. The man in the blue van is a cruel con artist, and my mother a gullible soul, a dreadful combination. Although being a con artist is the least harmful aspect to the man's identity, for he turned out to be involved in far worse illicit activity. Truly, my mother once appeared youthful for 40, but has since morphed into a warm, fleshy skeleton. Her car became a hearse where I too frequently found her folded over, dead asleep. As much as I may be pained by the past, I wouldn't be quite the same without the wounds. Because of my troubling experiences, I now am driven to enter the field of social work to help children and families find stability and safety. In order to cope with the stress of having an estranged mother, I find company in creative writing, such as poetry. Without further ado, I present a poem I wrote that has allowed me to process my experience. The apparency of absence gives way to an incurable ache, a shallow sigh from a warm, fleshy skeleton slams shutters and shatters panes. And how am I to do away with the very shards that mirrored me? For thou art thy mother's glass, now a window with a tunnel, heavy and empty. Reflections fell to embers, and flame painted the leaves, landing at last on cold, colorless crystal. Shadows flamed up, their charcoal shapes flickered. Cast out all that permits sight, for when the light's out, it's less dangerous. I rise from ashes, comprised of the expired light of bodies that have burned themselves down to nothing. Once upon a time, on the ticking glass calendar, a long 20 years ago, there was a well-intended woman too soon mothered by a starving artist with an ego inflated by dust and drink, and though his hunger sated, his thirst could not be quenched, and so he melted away. And so, with dainty daydream discovered, she fed empty stomachs, for as they say, the nourishment of the soul is feeding others, until one harsh and hollow day came to play on a dated paper clock, oh, not so long ago, when only crumbs covered her pristine opaline plate, and mind you, the faucet still flowed and the oven still flamed, and yet, for unknown reasons in which I abhor, and for whatever reward accompanied risk, instead of simply cooking more, she let the man in the blue van cook her to a crisp. I used to call her mother, but said title was reduced to a genetic fact, a sad science that bears no heart in its dark womb, like the pouch of a thylacine, no longer tangible, as housing no joys. All essence of her presence turned phantasmagoric and shrouded in a hellish haze. The dearly departed joy in her laughter felt so faint and far, as if fleeing from ear. Ha ha!